Welcome to episode 245 of the Fabulously Keto Podcast. And today I'm interviewing Patrick Holford. I first met Patrick at the PHC conference in 2023, then again in 2024, and we caught up once more at the PHC conference in Glasgow last autumn. He kindly agreed to come on, and with his busy schedule, we booked for June this year. In today's conversation, we get practical about prevention. Test, don't guess. We talk about tracking markers like homocysteine, vitamin D, omega-3 and HbA1c, how B vitamins support methylation, and why DHA-rich seafood and real food meals can make a meaningful difference to brain and metabolic health. Here's Patrick's bio. Patrick Holford, BSc, DIP, ION, FBANT, NTCRP, is a leading spokesman on nutrition and mental health and the founder of the Food for the Brain Foundation, Vitamin C for COVID, and the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, an educational charity that offers degree-accredited training in nutritional therapy. Originally trained in psychology, Patrick was involved in groundbreaking research showing that multivitamins can increase children's IQ scores, the subject of a Horizon television documentary in the 1980s. He was one of the first promoters of the importance of zinc, essential fats, low GL diets, and homocysteine lowering B vitamins, and their importance in mental health and Alzheimer's prevention, working closely with David Smith, Emeritus Professor of Pharmacology at the University of Oxford. He is CEO of the charitable Food for the Brain Foundation and Director of the Alzheimer's is Preventable campaign and Chair of their Scientific Advisory Board. He is author of several papers and 46 books translated into over 30 languages, including the Optimum Nutrition Bible, Optimum Nutrition for the Mind, Food is Better Medicine Than Drugs, The 10 Secrets of Healthy Aging, and Upgrade Your Brain, as well as his latest book, Alzheimer's, Prevention is the Cure. He is a retired visiting professor at the University of Teesside and is in the Orthomolecular Medicine Hall of Fame and on the editorial board for the Orthomolecular News Service. Patrick brings 40 years of research and experience in the field of nutrition. So let's go and hear from Patrick. Welcome, Patrick, to the Fabulously Keto Podcast. It's fabulous to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm a great fan of the keto approach. Really interesting.
Well, actually, I called this Fabulously Keto because I did keto and I felt fabulous. But since then, that was 8 years ago. And since then, 6 years ago. And since then, everything's opened up. So I've become more open to all sorts of things, especially since becoming a primal health coach. It's just real food, low carb. It's all good. So we always start with, where in the world are you?
Oh, well, I'm in the Black Mountains of Wales. This is South Wales, absolutely glorious. I live in a national park. I've got 19 acres, grow all my own food. I literally just went and plucked 6 eggs from the chicken's little coopy place. Yes.
Oh, that's fabulous. So I know that you can't be too far away because I saw you yesterday. So yeah.
Yeah, that was a fabulous public health collaboration conference.
It was.
And the whole keto cancer thing is, particularly interesting.
Yeah, I find that very interesting, especially as my family have had a lot of cancer there's been a lot of cancer in the family. Some people have diabetes, some people have Alzheimer's. For my family, it's cancer. So yeah, really interesting. So I'm going to start by asking you, first of all, to tell us about your vegan diet and also how you came to your vegan diet.
Yeah. So I describe myself as a pegan, slightly tongue-in-cheek, pescatarian, 8 eggs. Can't see any reason not to. My chickens are very happy to donate them. And I'm not sort of anti-plant, as some people, in the keto world have kind of gone. And everyone always talks about a carnivore diet. And I remember one of the charts, shown in this conference had like 10 meat options and one fish option. So the interesting point, and this was very prevalent, this particular conference was about the terrain, of our cells, the environment of our mitochondria and all the rest of it that creates all diseases. So many people don't realize that Darwin was really the breakthrough who said there are two forces driving evolution. One is the conditions of existence, which is terrain, really. And
Yeah.
the other was natural selection, which, if you like, is sort of genetic variations. But he said the first is much more important than the second. So I'm a psychologist originally. I'm fascinated in human experience, the fullest experience that we can have. It was actually driven by some sort of what we could call mystical or peak experiences that I had as a teenager, and not drug induced, by the way.
My brain did go there.
Yeah. Actually, one happened direct after a vaccine, but there's a whole nother story.
Ooh.
No, I'll tell you now very briefly. But I was a fan of Carl Jung and Hermann Hesse as a teenager. I literally had pictures of them in my wallet, and I really loved what they were saying. And I decided I would go to India and find a guru, find a teacher. So I went to the doctor to get the jab for hepatitis, gamma globulin, and literally went home after the jab, sat on the floor in my room, and had an out-of-body experience, and went into infinite, eternal, pulsing light and other such things. It was rather amazing. So yes, when people say, am I anti-vax? I say, good heavens, no. I had a phenomenal but that got me interested in who we are. And then I went to study psychology, got into intelligence and also schizophrenia because that was a major source of suffering. And then, one of the important questions is how on earth did we become human? Because, our USP is our brain, our intellectual cognitive capacity. And many people don't really sort of ask that question. It's a real shame because we split from chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas 6.5 million years ago. Their brain size has stayed exactly the same.
Mm.
Our hominid brain size got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And, Homo sapiens sort of hit the scene around 100,000 years ago. And about maybe 30,000 years ago, and it's all done on skull size, we get to almost 1.7 kilos, 1,700 grams. So, quadruple that of our origins. And think of conditions of existence. What is necessary for that? And it had to be, and there are many reasons why this is also, substantiated, but it had to be a high marine food diet. And what was discovered in the 70s, which is fascinating, is that literally, if you look at the fatty acids, there are all sorts of different fatty acids. There's two that are major. I mean, 20 times higher than anything else. And one is DHA, omega-3, which only comes from fish or marine food.
Yeah.
And the other is arachidonic acid, which ultimately only comes from plants. It can come from animals or eaten plants. And the amazing thing is that has not changed. Whether it's a mouse or a dolphin or a whale or anything else, we wondered if those dolphins who have every single bone that we have in our hands and arms, so in their fetal development, they've got legs and they've got arms, and they've committed fully to the ocean. Has it changed? And the answer is no, it has not changed. But what has changed in the last 20 or so thousand years ago is our brain size. We're now averaging 1,350 grams. So the logic, if you take terrain seriously, if you take conditions of existence seriously, which I do, I think is so much more important than genetics, then you have to say that our conditions of existence had to support the growing of the brain. What are the nutrients necessary? And also now our conditions of existence must have changed in the last 20,000 years, which is probably to do with agriculture, such that we are shrinking. And, I think that's, whatever you look at, we look at our randomized trials on this and this and this and this. It's always good to say, how does this fit in the possibility of our evolutionary biology?
Yeah, I noticed that yesterday they were saying a lot about, oh, where's the research? Oh, where's the research? But we're the only animals in the world that need some research to tell us what to eat.
Yeah, it is a little bit strange because we get this sort of, on the one hand, we're evidence-based, we want to do that randomized controlled trial, but as is very clear, the money tends not to be available, so it's very hard to do them. And when you come to diet trials, it's phenomenally hard to do. I mean,
Set up.
have a placebo group or a control group or whatever it is. It's very, very tricky. So not a bad idea. I do think in the future, big data, which is what we're collecting at the charity foodforthebrain.org, will guide us. And I didn't sort of fully realize it, but it's a wonderful example because my teacher was Linus Pauling, who had 2 Nobel Prizes, the only man ever to have won 2 unshared Nobel Prizes and 48 PhDs. And when Einstein was asked, "Are you a genius?" he said, "If you want a real genius, it's Linus Pauling." So he totally got what Einstein was saying in physics, applied it to chemistry. That is the birth of modern chemistry. And then he spent his last 38 years obsessed with vitamin C and on colds, flu, and cancer, and later heart disease. But what happened to him, and I didn't realize this till later, and it's a wonderful example of these principles, is that every single animal walking on the face of this planet, with very few exceptions, including primates, fruit-eating bats, and guinea pigs, which is why they're the perfect experimental animal, makes vitamin C. And we know that we have lost the ability to make vitamin C at some point in our evolutionary past. We know exactly what bit of code is missing. And consequently, what he noticed was, we said, that's really interesting, that animals that make vitamin C don't get colds and cancer. And, have you ever seen a goat with a cold, for example? It makes over 10 grams, 10,000 milligrams, which is, 220 oranges worth a day. And this is one of those wonderful blind spots. When COVID comes along, we're stroking our dogs and our cats and living with our cows and sheep and goats, and none of them get COVID.
No.
So, and actually there was a study in Newcastle which showed that cats actually got the same variant of COVID as their owners, but no cat died.
Yeah.
So why? And in this case, these animals will produce loads of vitamin C. So Linus Pauling's very simple logic, this is just logic really. He said, how much vitamin C do I need to take in to get my blood level to the same as every 99.9% of animals who live on this planet?
Yeah.
It was about a gram an hour, which is 22 supermarket oranges an hour or something.
Yeah.
And thus was born, a very sort of interesting concept. So yes, studies, yes, we want them. Big data, yes, we want them. Personal experiences. And the lovely thing about vitamin C is if you get cold and you take a gram an hour or 2 grams every 2 hours, it's gone. I mean, COVID, I had it twice, beginning and end, and it was an 18-hour experience. I know exactly what to do. So you don't need, what I mean is that it doesn't, if you do that experiment yourself, and I'm 67 and I haven't had a day off. Well, I think I did have a day off for COVID. It works. You don't care whether there's an RCT.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Works. So, if you do keto, weight pours off and you feel good, you know that it works. But it's quite difficult to stick to, especially in our world where we are surrounded by choices, really.
Yeah. But it is a challenge to be in the world and stay on track. But I guess it depends your motivation and how sick you are and all things like that. So what I wanted to ask you because you're very focused. So there was a very noticeable difference yesterday at the PHC conference with those that are really carnivore meat based and you that are more fish based, which I still consider carnivore because for me, animal based is I say meat, and when I say meat, it includes fish and all animal products.
Yeah.
How do we today find good sources of fish that are not contaminated and not full of mercury? I mean, I think, I know myself,
Let's talk about that. The mercury thing is really a big distraction. The point is, there's a very, very good study, Sasaski, S-A-S-K, Sasaski, S-A-S-A-S-K-I. But basically, you get mercury in fish, and the bigger the fish, the more the mercury. Simple as that. You also get selenium, and the bigger the fish, the more selenium. And by the way, selenium binds to mercury. So, quite a lot of the mercury in big fish is not available. And quite a lot of the selenium in fish is not available. So anyway, this was a very, very nice study which looked at disease rates and fish consumption and then went down into is this to do with omega-3 or what's the effect of mercury, cadmium, selenium, and the ingredients. And what you get is a massive benefit from seafood overall, And largely that benefit is omega-3. There's a bit of selenium benefit, very, very clearly. And there's a tiny bit of negative, tiny, on the mercury and cadmium. So, this is an exact number, but I would say that, the benefit of fish is about 100 times the negative of potentially a little bit of mercury. And salmon or smaller, you're really not getting much mercury. Most of the mercury, by the way, even today, despite pollution and industrial processes, actually comes from ocean floor volcanoes. That's where the mercury actually comes from. So it's kind of always been there. So when you say, how do I get good fish? Well, I mean, most of the omega-3 and supplements actually comes from anchovies. So anchovies are good, and they're a whole fish. They're not farmed. Mackerel is good. Whole fish, not farmed. Wild salmon obviously is more expensive. We say smash it. Salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, fantastic. Herrings, kippers, etc. So I'm not terribly worried. Of course, we need to clean up the oceans. And of course, we don't want lots of plastics in fish. Most of the plastics you will not find in the flesh. As you can imagine, if the fish has absorbed it, gets stuck in the liver or the kidneys or the organs of elimination. So you don't, possibly in the gut. But those are generally not the bits of fish that you're eating.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's all the oysters and mussels and all that sort of stuff. And of course, I'm kind of mindful of that. Like if I'm in Cornwall, I might have some, but if I'm in Dover, I wouldn't be wanting to eat the oysters there. Sort of thing. And I'm not, I many years ago, I had a moment where I decided not to eat meat. Just a moment. And I'm not anti eating meat. But a couple of things just to say about meat. The first thing is I think we tend to do a reasonable disservice in having a go at vegans. And as a nutritionist, I don't think it is the right diet. And I wrote a book called Optimum Nutrition for Vegans to help those who choose to do that, to do it healthily. I think they can. Doing keto vegan is really, really difficult, almost impossible. Yep. But I think what we don't really take respect of is there's a lot of people who choose not to eat meat because they don't wish to kill an animal if they don't have to. Now, we can have different views about it, but I think it's just good to understand that that is what's happening. I mean, even, in Buddhism, if you kill an animal, and I actually, believe in this, I want anything I eat, I need to be able to kill. I mean, I know I'm not killing the mackerel I buy in Waitrose, but the point is if I go fishing and I catch some fish and I'm willing to do that and watch them die or kill them, fair enough. And what I do is effectively grace. I thank the fish. I hate there are two things I really hate: wasting animal produce, like someone orders a steak and eats a little bit of it and chucks the rest away. And I also do hate animal cruelty. So, if the decision is to, eat a cow or a pig or whatever, eat the whole thing, use every part of it, say thank you because it's becoming you, in essence. And, and then the other really thing, and I'm sort of pushing it here a little bit on the meat front, is that, we talk about grass-fed, we want grass-fed meat and all the rest of it. Well, which I agree compared to factory farmed and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. But cows never ate grass. I mean, the point is, if you look at the origin of cows, they were in the woods, in the forests, eating scrubs, eating bushes, eating leaves, I just went down to visit my alpacas who, effectively cameloids, a bit like sheep. And, I was telling them not to go and eat the nice tops of the hedge that I just planted. They'd much rather eat the hedge than the grass. Yeah. So even grass-fed is not, we found out how to capture cows, stick them in a field, plant grass, and feed them grass. So, and then here's the weird thing, which, has always intrigued me. I happen to run safaris in Kenya. And what's so extraordinary is you've got this balance of animals. There just seems to be a balance. So, the idea of survival of the fittest is the fittest will have eaten all the rest. And there you go. But there's this extraordinary balance. But also, they're so lean. Every animal is lean. Those impalas, those deer, and all the rest of it. I mean, they are considerably less than 5% fat, right? So when we talk about going keto and what we want is maybe 70% of what we eat, fat, high, which I totally get, why. Actually, you've got to enclose an animal in a field and feed it, something and allow it to accumulate fat to be able to get a fatty meat,
Meat.
right? Right?
Yeah.
However, the fatty fish, just as a point of reference, who are the big fish who ate the little fish,
Yeah.
have more omega-3s and so on. So then they're kind of naturally quite rich in fats. So there's a few, sort of not inconsistencies. And I think, we talk about the Maasai quite a lot, which is nice. And I happen to hang out with Maasai and all the rest of it. But that's quite late in evolution, these herders. And, some people call sheep desert makers. So this herding of animals has a few problems as well. And I had a couple of friends, one of whom has died, professor of archaeology and anthropology, who had the largest collection of ancient human feces in the world.
Nice.
So, nice, isn't it? So, they were asking, what did we eat, from the earliest evidence of, fecal matter? And the answer was real mixed bag. So I remember in the days when everyone was into food combining or not combining, like don't eat carbs with protein sort of thing. And what you found, I mean, even, they found lentils, people are very against beans as well, despite the fact that actually, if you take two food groups, the most predict cancer, certainly breast and prostate, the more milk a country consumes, the greater is the risk. The more beans a country eats, the lesser is the risk.
Yeah, yeah.
So you get down to Chinese rural peasants who have beans every day. So soya is a staple food, never touch milk because they just consider it weird. And
Yes.
Westerns are said to smell weird. And in one study I looked at some years ago, that a man's lifetime risk of prostate cancer was 1 in 27,000, a woman's lifetime risk of breast cancer, 1 in 9,000. And here in the UK, it's 1 in 7 risk for both man and woman, prostate and breast.
Mm.
So, there we are. We're eating nuts and seeds and some plant foods and, definitely marine food. And the marine food is really interesting, actually, because number one, if you think of the evolution of us out of Africa, it had to be along water. I mean, you always have to be by water because we need water. So you can't exist without water. So you're going to be traveling along rivers and so on. And then the oldest they found down the road from where I live, the Gower Peninsula, 40,000-year-old complete Homo sapiens. And the skeleton had jewelry, a necklace, and various bits of bling made from shells. Assumed it was a woman, on that basis. Turned out to be a man, Pavalan man. And then did the bone analysis, and almost a quarter of the diet was marine food. So if you go back, in this case, 40,000 years or whenever, the estuaries, the rivers, the ponds, the lakes, the wetlands, the coasts. I mean, I was just in west of Cork in Ireland, and I said to my host there, what was it like when you were growing up? And they said, you could not catch a mackerel. I mean, you could not, you just throw the line and out comes a mackerel. You just got way too many mackerel. And New York was a complete oyster bed. They were eating 1 million oysters a day in the 1800s in there. London also, you got free oysters with a pint. So the point is, you imagine, go back 300 years or something, you're going to be by water. The streams and the rivers, etc., are full of stuff. Let's say it's before even peasant farming, right? You don't have an easy sheep or cow. So, yeah, you can hunt an animal for sure, absolutely. But they're quite hard to catch. Good rewards, a nice big animal will last you and your tribe for a while.
Yeah.
But you can also walk along the coast, and when the tides come in and out, little fish get caught in the rock pool, and you've got crabs and lobsters and mussels. And if you are fishing, and by the way, the earliest evidence of humanity, popping up in South Africa and here and there, you find a lot of evidence of shells and early fishing and so on. So yeah, you can do it on meat. Maybe when the Ice Age came along and all the rest of it, there are periods of our evolution where periods of people were primarily carnivore.
Yeah.
And of course the animals will have eaten, plants. So some of those antioxidants and things transfer into the animals. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, really.
It is. Yeah, I agree. So now, more recently, you've been focusing on Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, talk to us about homocysteine. What is it? What it does? My understanding is it's a marker of inflammation. But yesterday you were talking really quickly. There's his book, Alzheimer's Prevention is the Cure. Fabulous. Talk to us a little bit about Alzheimer's in general, but also I wanted to understand more about the homocysteine.
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually picked Alzheimer's for a very specific reason, and that was I really wanted to see how we could get prevention happening. And I thought long and hard about this because, I've written books on diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and whatever. And I figured it's going to be really interesting because, in a sense, once you've got holes in your brain, they're not coming back. So, in other words, it's not reversible in the same way that diabetes is reversible. And number two, I think it's going to become a major issue. So 2022, the Office of National Statistics shows that Alzheimer's is number one, the biggest killer. It's the number one killer of people. People don't realize that. And number two, it is the greatest healthcare cost, way more than diabetes and obesity, actually. And number three, it's the biggest fear.
Yes.
So I sort of, I went out with this statement, Alzheimer's is preventable. And this book is called Alzheimer's Prevention is the Cure. Just to plant that idea, because, everyone goes, isn't it in the genes, just like cancer? Isn't it in the genes? And actually, it's way less than 1%. I mean, less than 0.5% truly of cases of Alzheimer's are caused by genes. So I thought, here's a good way in. And in a way, I think all of these diseases, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, arthritis, which is also a metabolic disease, and Alzheimer's, they're at a broad level, they're the same disease hitting a different place.
Yes.
The same underlying disruption in our conditions of existence affecting our cells and mitochondria and everything else. So that was the context of it. And then and Alzheimer's is quite nice in this context, because if you then step back and say, where's the evidence and where is it strongest? I'll pick sort of four. Number one, homocysteine and B vitamins, which I'll unpack in just a second, has the evidence as causal. So in other words, I'll talk about that. Number two, fats. So brain fats, omega-3, vitamin D, particularly phospholipids, very, very strong. Number three, although it's hard to do studies on, sugar, really, and crap, high refined, high glycemic load diets. And number four, broadly antioxidants, polyphenols, fruit and veg, and that kind of thing. And having, been in nutrition for a very long time, I would say that those are the four primary biological processes going on in us. So, for example, if you want to make energy, you've got to have good fuel supply. So that's the glucose or ketones and so on. When you make energy, you will always make oxidants. So you need to mop those up. And that's where the oxidants come in and why smoking and pollution are bad. So that really covers those two. But then what are cells made of? And particularly if we look at a brain cell, the membrane through which all the talking happens is basically made of fatty acids. And that's that DHA I mentioned earlier, omega-3 and arachidonic acid, omega-6. And it has to be bound to things called phospholipids, which are very rich in fish and in meat, particularly organ meats, and eggs. So my eggs I just plucked will give me tons of phospholipids, but they can't be put together unless you have methylation, a process called methylation, which is dependent on vitamin B12, which is only in animal foods, which is why vegans have to supplement B12, and B6, and folate, which is very rich in greens. And if you are not doing methylation as a consequence of a lack of any of those nutrients, a blood level of a toxic amino acid called homocysteine goes up. And the higher your homocysteine, the greater your risk for Alzheimer's. If homocysteine goes down, your memory gets better and your brain stops shrinking. And above 11, which is very common, I mean, I'd say half of everyone my age, over 65, will have a homocysteine above 11, which means their brains are shrinking. So then we come on to randomized controlled trials, and the B vitamins reduce brain shrinkage by 53% on average. And then they worked out that is the omega-3 difference. So this particular study, which was at Oxford University and is a perfect RCT, then found that the third with the lowest omega-3 in their blood had no benefit of the B vitamins, and the third with the highest omega-3 in their blood had 73% less brain shrinkage. 30% ended the year with no clinical dementia rating at all. In other words, these were pre-dementia people, no longer diagnosable. And of course, that makes sense when you understand that the omega-3s can only be bound into the membrane through which all the talking happens but it's actually more than that, because actually the DHA is the talking. I mean, what I'm trying to say is there's no way we could be Homo sapiens without DHA. And then you go, as I think I said at the conference, I just went on to PubMed, and there's 30,400 studies on homocysteine. And there's a very nice paper by A.D. Smith, former Vice Dean of Oxford Medical School, Professor David Smith, Oxford University, homocysteine as a biomarker for 100 diseases. Including most cancers, but Parkinson's, motor neuron disease, bipolar, schizophrenia, dementia, autism, neural tube defects, strokes, heart attacks, etc. And what's extraordinary, and it kind of interesting in the space, where we live in the keto world, one of the big concepts that emerging, one is definitely the terrain, the conditions of existence, which is great. And the other is this focus on mitochondria, the so-called powerhouse of the cell, but it's a bit more like the motherboard we're starting to learn. And we learn that everything that is harmful for you pretty much affects the mitochondria, whether it's stress or smoking or lack of nutrients. However, that methylation process, which is happening at a rate of something like 1 billion reactions every few seconds, is fundamental to mitochondrial function. And genes, when we hear about genes being turned on or off or up or down like a dimmer switch, epigenetics, and how things like vitamin D or even a keto diet actually starts to reprogram inflammatory pathways and switch on or off genes and all that sort of stuff. The actual switching, literally the switching of a gene on or on, is done by methylation. So almost everywhere you go, production of neurotransmitters, inflammatory processes, energy production, you're going to bump up against these B vitamins and methylation. So it's like what we learned in relation to cancer, for example, is that and I totally agree with this, GKI, glucose ketone index, getting the glucose down, ketone up, until you score 2. In other words, if you get your blood sugar to 4 and your ketones to 2, you've got a GKI of 2. Cancer cells can't fuel, and that's fantastic. You're starving the cancer cell. But faulty methylation can also trigger cancers. So I just want to get the homocysteine measured and then lower it. It's very simple. That's all you have to do. Measure it, lower it, and you've eliminated that factor.
Okay. So if somebody has a high homocysteine, and we'll come on to what the stuff that you're doing also, but if somebody has a high homocysteine, how do they bring it down? Is it just methylated B6, B12, and B9?
So the first thing to understand is for most younger people, your homocysteine will go up. If you're not eating enough folate, think foliage, greens, so you could be lacking in folate. And that is extremely common. Probably half of all children fail to get to an optimal folate level, or B12. So let's say you were plant-based and didn't supplement B12, because there's no B12 in plant foods at all. You have to supplement it, which is very common. The level in the blood below which you get brain shrinkage and neurodevelopmental abnormalities is a level of 500. Incorrectly in the UK and in America, they've set the reference range to 180. The average B12 level of children in the EU is 350. So the average child is already below the optimal for neurodevelopment. So B12 deficiency, so to speak, is very common. And again, bouncing back on that Gower Peninsula man. Now, if a quarter of their diet was marine food, very rich in B12, and let's assume they were doubling, they didn't do 6,000 steps a day, they did like 16,000, which they would have done, hunting, gathering, getting wood and all that stuff. That means half my diet would have to be seafood to be getting the same amount of B12 plus omega-3 and everything else that our ancestors were getting in the period that the brain evolved. Mm-hmm. So the idea of just eat a well-balanced diet, is like, it's comparing, a very tiny 0.1% of humanity's evolution the last 50 years and saying you can get all the nutrients you need from a well-balanced diet. The biggest reason we can't is we don't eat enough. We eat a fraction of what our ancestors ate that created us, a fraction. So now we've got maybe a quarter of the amount of food to get the same amount of nutrients from deficient soil with refined foods and everything else.
Yeah.
It's the idea of saying, food only, not supplements, which is, and I think a lot of people who are moving into keto in the medical world, and excited by it and sort of kind of go a bit off drugs, no pills, they don't realize that their medical training has made them very, very anti-supplements. And however, in the same breath, they will say, we're into evidence-based medicine.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the evidence and the trials on things like, B12, Alzheimer's, homocysteine, it is totally parallel with the best drug trials ever. So why would you say this drug has evidence and then say supplements not necessary?
Mm.
And I remember reading something, Tim Spector, Professor Tim Spector, the Zoe app, here he was saying about what he does to prevent dementia, eat more fruit and veg and fish and this and that, whatever, and don't drink too much. And then says, watch out for, supplements, all these kind of outrageous things. And it's just, so, and what perhaps a lot of doctors don't realize is that one of the reasons why there is this anti-supplement sort of agenda within medicine. I mean, please understand that Oxford University, if you train in medicine, you get 7 minutes on nutrition.
Mm.
That's what I was told by the person who teaches diabetes. They get 7 minutes. In their diabetes lecture, they said, this is the only nutrition you're going to get. But the point is that going, in a sense, going keto or eating a well-balanced diet or doing more exercise or not smoking is not really going to threaten any drug. What threatens a drug is when you can get better results from a simple B vitamin pill and an omega-3 pill. And you do. That's what the studies show. So you've got 2 pills that cost you £100 a year, perhaps, and they have already massively outsurpassed the Alzheimer's antibody, amyloid antibody drugs, which will cost about 50,000 a year when you factor in all the medical process of injection. So when you've got, £100 or £50,000 drug patented nutrients, not patentable because they exist in nature, you have a major threat.
Yeah.
And I realized there was above 11. So to come back to your question, and I'll make this a bit personal, homocysteine is actually quite hard to test, but we have been working on it for years and finally solved a way of accurately measuring homocysteine from a pinprick of blood. So you can buy a kit from our charity, foodforthebrain.org, prick your finger, drop of blood onto a card, send it back to the lab. It's accurate. When we'd achieved that, my wife and I, she's a few years younger than me. We eat the same food. We had the test, and my level was 7, which is optimal. Her level was 15, which is brain shrinking. And consequently, I supplement 10 micrograms of B12 in a multivitamin, which is, the RDA is 2.5, a ridiculous dietary arbitrary. That's what RDA stands for, 2.5 micrograms. We should all get about 10. She supplements 500 micrograms. So she needs a lot more. And I can't say exactly why that is. We think a lot of it is to do with decreasing absorption, to do with stomach acid later in life. But I don't know that that's the case. But she, what is the optimal amount of B12 for her? It's the amount that lowers homocysteine. And 500 micrograms you cannot eat. So the answer to your question is, how do you get it tested? It should be, it's so much more important than cholesterol. It actually predicts 2/3 of heart attacks in the elderly. You can die because your homocysteine is raised from a heart attack. It damages arteries. It's not only an indicator of B vitamin deficiency, it actually creates toxins in the brain. It raises p-tau, which tangles the nerves, but also it is an arterial toxin. So when we look at studies, we often look at what we call the odds ratio. So what's the risk of a smoker having lung cancer versus somebody else? And, when we see a doubling of risk, like people who eat less fruit and veg have twice the risk of, whatever, we're excited. Well, the odds ratio of having vascular disease in the brain, so think strokes, mini MIAs, mini strokes and so on, Not MIAs, that's missing in action.
CIA. CIAs.
Yes, probably ends up being an MIA.
NMI, yeah.
But the odds ratio is 17. So in other words, if your homocysteine is raised, it increases your risk of dementia by tenfold, increases your risk of cerebrovascular disease by 17-fold. That is massive, right? So then what do you do? And the answer ultimately is probably yes, eat more greens, eat more beans, very rich in folate, make sure you get enough B12. But the simplest way is to take a supplement which contains B6, B12, folate, and there's a few other nutrients that help as well, because they have reliably been shown to lower your level. And then maybe once it's lower, stop the supplement or reduce it or see what happens. And you can play around. It's a little bit like vitamin D. What's your optimal vitamin D? And now we know in the winter you need to supplement it, some more than others. And so what's really cool, for those who can afford it, because it costs about £200, is that if you could do a blood test that measures both homocysteine and vitamin D and omega-3 and HbA1c is the measure of blood sugar. That's what's used for diabetes. And now we have this exquisite measure of antioxidant status, glutathione index. For those who are into science, it's the reduced active glutathione GSH divided by the spent used glutathione GSSG. Now we don't just guess, oh, I think I eat enough fish, I think I eat enough veg, or maybe even I'm a carnivore and I believe I can get it all from me.
Yep.
I say, no problem, but I would love you just to have that blood test, because my belief is that if you actually have your HbA1c down, mine is 4.7% in the American measure, and your homocysteine good, 7, and your vitamin D above 75 nanomoles, and your omega-3 index above 8%, maybe ideally 10%, I don't think you can get sick. I mean, I think that all of these diseases go. And it is possible that, if you eat keto and you've got your insulin, we know insulin is key, and then your HbA1c, I mean, that's going to eliminate a lot of risk. But I think you can get Alzheimer's even if just from diabetes. But I think you can have a perfect blood sugar and be lacking omega-3 and get Alzheimer's, or be lacking B12 for one reason or another and get Alzheimer's. So I think where we get very monopolar, we say like Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. Well, for some it is, but not for all. So I think what we're seeing with Alzheimer's, which introduces, we've got the idea of terrain, which is a fundamental concept, which we really buy into. We'll stop, messing around so much with genes and cancer. And then we have now the idea of, there's a number of factors. Now we're starting to think systems-based. So cover all the bases. So the keto glucose, that's a fundamental, no question, but it's not the only fundamental. Homocysteine, methylation, B vitamins is another fundamental.
Yeah. So some of us, I don't know because I haven't tested my DNA, but I suspect I have that MTHFR
677T, or if you have the double allele or the double mutation TT.
So
what does that mean?
What does it mean? But also, does it not kick into the epigenetics that you could switch it on and switch it off? And should people, if they don't know, like me, if you don't know what genes you have, should you just take a methylated B vitamin? Should it be methylated already?
Okay. So let's break that down. And actually, it's very good because I think a lot of people don't really understand what genes are, because it's not explained, and everyone uses words that they further don't understand. So compounds thing. So what happens is most of the sort of important stuff in our body is made out of combinations of amino acids. Think of them like letters in the alphabet. So proteins are made out of them. Insulin is made out of it. And, various parts of your bones and skin and all the rest of it are made out of it. So genes are the instructions for the order in which to put amino acids together.
Yes.
So a lovely example, we've heard of this ApoE gene, and apo means apoprotein, and then we've heard of lipoprotein as in low density lipoprotein LDL or high density lipoprotein HDL. The apoprotein is like the protein carrier upon which you can put a fat. So the ApoE gene is the instructions to make the carrier apoprotein, which is used in the transportation of fat.
Mm-hmm.
And if you happen to have ApoE4 from one parent, if you have it from two, your risk of dementia Alzheimer's goes up. You're not so good at dealing with fats. And as a consequence, you do, by the way, need more omega-3. So and then over here, we hear methylation. There's a lot of reactions, and there's something called the MHTF, the methyl tetrahydrofolate, MTHFR reductase enzyme, reductase, which is helping to turn homocysteine into the good stuff, which is called S-adenosyl methionine, or SAMe, which does the methylation. So we're eating methionine from food, turning it into something toxic, homocysteine, with enough nutrients. The enzyme MTHFR will turn it into the good guy. And if you happen to inherit the gene MTHFR677T, you're less good at that.
Yes.
So you're more folate dependent. And if you get it from both parents as TT, you have a higher risk of Alzheimer's dementia. So that's how it works. Second point is, in studies, almost all studies where people have either changed diet or had omega-3 or B vitamins, or there've been some sort of positive interaction, they have measured these. And they need to, because they need to know that the placebo group and the treatment group are relatively equal. So they go 20% in the placebo group had MTHFR 677TT, which is very common, and similarly here. So this is controlling for confounding variables. So these things are measured. And then the question is, in the study on diet, or on the study on B vitamins, or on omegas, did those with ApoE4 do better or worse? Did those with MTHFR 677TT do better or worse? And in almost every study, it makes no difference.
Okay.
So it's like a little weakness. And once you start to do the right things, that weakness is eradicated. So do I particularly need to have a methylfolate in my supplement? So a pre-methylated folate versus, for example, a very inexpensive folic acid, or methyl B12, a pre-methylated B12. Why not? It has an advantage. So that is, most homocysteine lowering supplements these days are going to use methylfolate, methyl B12. But actually, if you look at the studies I was just talking about, they were just using cheap folic acid, which the body then activates through this methylation process. So why not? It's probably a small advantage. And when I say small advantage, in studies that have actually given methylfolate supplement versus folic acid, I'm just thinking of one. In one, it lowered the methylfolate, lowered the homocysteine by 16%, and the folic acid by 13%. So you're looking at a relatively small advantage. There are some situations, not MTHFR, something called DFR, another gene polymorphism, where actually they can't turn folic acid into SAMe. They really do need methylfolate. So there are a few situations.
Okay.
You have to go more specific. But, I hate to say this because I helped to create the whole profession of nutritional therapy, where we learn about these things and we know how to personalize and go into the nth detail, which is great. It's all valid. And you get slightly better results. But it's a bit like in our conference, where you look at the simplest things that deliver the biggest punch. And in most cases, just get enough omega-3, get your homocysteine down, don't eat sugar, eat a low GL diet or a keto diet. And the rest is relatively small in its additional benefits.
Yeah. Okay. So tell people now about, if you want to tell them about the book, or we can go online and look at that. If you'd rather talk about the data stuff that you're trying to collect.
I'll do both.
Okay.
In essence, at the charity, foodforthebrain.org, anyone, foodforthebrain.org, can go there and do a test, which is not a questionnaire, which will actually accurately work out your cognitive function right now. And it's all on a traffic light system, red, amber, yellow, green, and you'll probably be in the green. You then fill in a questionnaire, which asks you everything about your diet and lifestyle. And if you're doing everything wrong, it will give you a dementia risk index for 100%. In other words, you are going to get a problem later in life, not now, but later,
Yeah.
And if you're doing everything right, you score 0%. And then it will show you, and that's for those of you who are watching the film, you can see this, but you'll get a cog, 8 cogs, and one of them relates to sugar and low carb and so on. And each one will have a color. So you can see your weakest areas, which in a sense, put it the other way around, you can see your quickest wins.
Yeah.
You can see the area of your diet or lifestyle, because it could be lack of exercise, for example, that helps you. So I would say I would love everyone to do that. And then the book really unpacks the whole conversation. And much like we saw Tom Seyfried really make it clear that the gene theory of cancer is wrong.
Yes.
And we need a metabolic theory. I go through in the beginning, there's a chapter on the genes, a chapter on amyloid. The idea that it's caused by amyloid and will be cured by is wrong.
Yeah.
And then unpacks the whole thing. And by the time you get to the end of the book, you realize that this is actually not a difficult thing to make sure you never get. And that's the purpose of both what we're doing at the charity and also the book. But what is really cool is that we've done over 400,000 tests now, and it measures 3 things: executive function, it's like your ability to do things, attention, and memory, various aspects of memory. And this cognitive function score is steadily decreasing from all the tests we've done from the age of 18. So you won't, be hitting the point where you go, I think I can't remember stuff for quite a while, but it's such an exquisite test. So in a sense, Alzheimer's prevention starts at least from the age of 18. So what's cool is now you've got an actual measure, a bit like your blood pressure or something, and now you can change things. And we invite you back every 6 months to redo the test. And I would ask you very sincerely not only to do it, and some people, those who don't do the test at foodforthebrain.org usually say, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
And
That doesn't
you
help.
say, well, why do you want to know? Well, because, there's nothing you can do about it, which is so totally untrue. So I would say, don't be an ostrich, get your head out of the sand, do the test. But also, you've now become a citizen scientist, and just take that half hour or 20 minutes every 6 months, because you are actually helping us get data. All your data is anonymous. If you do choose to order the Drift blood test kit and find out what's going on, and by the way, red blood cells, most of these tests are red blood cells. They live for 3 months. So it's an average of 3 months. So 3 months later, when you've changed things, you can retest, find out where you're at. So it's a very simple process, really, to get yourself in the green.
Yeah.
And then relax, have a good time. And by then you may have hardwired these lifestyle habits. And we hope to get to data millions. And then never mind RCTs, we can say, who are the 5-star brainers? Who are the people whose cognitive function is staying really good? What are they doing? And then the big issue is, how do we get thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people to do that? This is prevention.
Yeah.
Same principle could be applied to everything. Everything you do to prevent dementia, Alzheimer's through foodforthebrain.org is preventing diabetes, cancer, arthritis, heart disease, and everything else.
Yeah. We need to get to that point. So thank you for that. And we'd like to finish, if you've got time, for your 3 top tips for anyone listening.
Well, do you know, the funny thing is, back in the 70s and 80s, we used to say, eat food you can pull out of the ground or out of a tree. Eat an actual thing that is a food. It's eggs or meat or fish or whatever it is, but, eat actual food. Don't eat stuff you can't understand. I would definitely say get sugar down. And so many times just look at the label, because it will tell you the sugar, the amount per serving. And if it's over 4 grams, forget it. We might like less, but we're really sugar conscious, conscious in sauces, and so many things. I haven't bought a bag of sugar for over 45 years. So I would say get sugar down. Take fish seriously. Take omega-3 seriously. I think it's really important. I would definitely eat more oily fish. And and I'm going to say organic, even though we've actually analyzed organic foods and found 40-fold variations in nutrients. but just move towards whole foods that have not been sprayed with pesticides and have actually been grown in earth and all that sort of stuff, and realize that your body is simply made from what you eat. Put nothing in your mouth, or very little in your mouth, that you wouldn't say is going to add to the health of your body. And that's what I would say, my top tips.
I love those. Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you, Patrick, for being with me today.
My pleasure, Jackie. Keep spreading the word.
Thanks so much to Patrick for joining me today and sharing such practical, hopeful tools. Go to foodforthebrain.org and take the free cognitive test. Don't leave it too late to do anything about your brain. We all know people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and for many it's more frightening than diabetes or heart disease. Now that we understand metabolic health is a significant aspect of Alzheimer's, there are steps we can take to reduce our risk. Start somewhere. Ideally, change your diet towards real, low-carb food, and if that feels too big right now, begin with the supplements Patrick recommends, and then move towards changing your diet when you're ready. If you want an easy first win, download my free Ultimate Energy Boosting Breakfast Guide from my website and use it to set up your mornings for steady energy and clearer thinking, and that will just get you on the path. Maybe share this episode with someone who cares or is worried about brain health. Thanks. See you next time. Disclaimer. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Our guests, whether healthcare professionals or not, are sharing their personal opinions and experiences. This does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making changes to your medications, treatment or lifestyle, particularly if you're on medication or have concerns about your health.